The NHS is not for sale. There will be no privatisation, were the words of Andrew Lansley in February 2012. Yet, only 3 months later, a deal was announced to sell off 80% of the administration of Britain's blood supply. The road to privatisation. Judge for yourself.
Do you know what the term privatisation of the NHS means?
Yeah, I guess it means when it's taken from the people.
What's your impression, Zainab, or feeling about the American healthcare system?
I hate it.
Yeah, that's a paradox, because it's not a healthcare system. It's nothing to do with health, it's nothing to do with care.
It's a business.
It's a business.
Yeah.
It's to do with making money off your fellow human beings when they're most vulnerable and most in need. That's when people give up all their cash, innit? They've got no other choice.
Michael Moore's Sicko is the most, like, incredible insight into, like, how it's run. There was a guy who, like, lost, like, 3 of his fingers or something in an accident, and he had to choose which one to have reattached because that's the only one that he could afford.
You go and have a baby and then you pay a bill for having your baby.
Yeah, what if you don't pay? I don't know what happens.
Yeah, they can't take your baby back.
Maybe they do.
Put it back. Put it back, like.
Yeah, I've heard some like horror stories where people are like ODing or whatever, and they're just sort of like left on the pavement, and people won't treat them. And stuff like that.
Yeah, that's it. If you don't have the money to pay for the insurance, or if you don't have the insurance, then you can't afford whatever you need, which is, I think, a bit scary.
Like, there's kids, yeah, in Chicago, and they get shot, and they die because that ambulance has to go past the private hospital to go to the government hospital, and they've died on the way.
Yeah.
That's not what they call America, the land of the free. That's a joke.
European and US leaders are rubbing their hands with anticipation for the largest free trade deal between them to come into force. But in Britain, it's got people fearing for their future of their universal state healthcare, and that it could get exploited for profit by corporate America.
British politicians have hailed it as the dawn of a new era. A huge transatlantic free trade deal that will make it easier to do business across the EU and the US. At the moment, it's being negotiated behind closed doors.
That term closed doors as well, it's just such an ugly term.
But as details have emerged, public hostility has grown. The aim of the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, or TTIP for short, is to create the world's largest single market between the EU and the US. As part of the agreement, public services like the NHS would be opened up to private profit-making companies. Multinationals would be able to bid for UK state contracts.
I mean, I don't watch the news a lot, but this is the first time I've heard about anything like this happening, like a partnership with the US or anything.
Campaigners fear that this will allow American healthcare companies to run UK hospitals, and that there will be more emphasis on profits for big business rather than patient care.
What kind of sick fuck wants to own a hospital to make money off people being
That's
ill?
scary. That is scary.
What happened to you, man? Like, what happened to you in your childhood, and then you grew up and you want to own a hospital and think it's a good idea to own a hospital and make money off people being ill?
And Gary's scared of Bilal. He should be scared of this shit, man.
Yeah. He should be scared of Lawrence.
What is the point in having a
What is the
welfare system
point? I know.
if it's only going to benefit
The
people?
NHS, if it is being opened up to privatisation and private companies.
When I've talked with people about our health service, some people say, oh, but it's not really being privatised, is it? Our government doesn't want us to realise that full privatisation of the NHS is their goal. So I decided to think about the issue the other way round. If I was an evil genius trying to privatise a much-loved public service, but in a way that the public wouldn't notice, how would I do it? So here is my plan for how to privatise the NHS on the sly in 5 simple steps. Step 1 is to introduce an internal market within the service. This means you break it up into little bits that have to act like independent companies. So instead of just cooperating together to meet patients' needs, health workers now have to buy and sell services from one another using a complicated system of internal contracts and fees. This is how you start to chip away at the public service ethos of the NHS. Now this step was first called for by Margaret Thatcher in 1988, and it was put into place through the NHS and Community Care Act of 1990. Despite Labour's initial promise in 1997 to scrap the internal market, actually they extended it even further. So by now the health service is fragmented into little bits. But all of those bits are still publicly funded and publicly run. Step 2 is to start replacing some of them with bits that are publicly funded but privately run. This way you start to ease private companies into the system. This kind of outsourcing was introduced by the Tories in the 1990s, then extended by New Labour in 2006. Since then, there's been an increasing rollout of a policy called Any Qualified Provider, which was finally made into law in 2012 with the new Health and Social Care Act. Now, almost all services have to be put out to tender and can be snapped up by private firms. So when you need hospital treatment, you won't necessarily be going to your local publicly run hospital for much longer. It may soon be, for instance, a Virgin Healthcare hospital with an NHS label stuck on it. Step 3 with an NHS label stuck on it.
Everything that we do is controlled by huge multinational corporations. Everything.
Well, yeah, and then I saw, like, you kind of just deal with that, and then seeing a picture of a hospital with the Virgin logo on just suddenly was really depressing.
But you have these academy schools.
But then you have it everywhere, but there's something about a hospital that's just like...
Because it's literally the only purpose is to care for people.
Yeah.
You need to get that idea out of your head, because it's not.
But that's what it feels like. It just feels like it's the privatisation of the trains lines. It just feels like the same kind of...
Yeah, mate, that is such a good
I mean, that
comparison.
The Virgin thing.
Yeah, I never even thought about that. That is kind of like the simplest way of, not simplest way, but like a way of looking at that's something that's happened. You know?
And how much does that like annoy you? Like,
and affect us. Think how much when I was commuting from Burko, how much money I would have spent on trains.
Yeah, and now it's with something that's, you know, okay, it's annoying having to pay a lot for a train, but this is having to, you know, go...
Not die.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Step 3 in the privatisation process is to start charging for some services that are deemed to be non-essential. In our health service, working people are already expected to pay for prescriptions, dentists and opticians. As the privatisation of our NHS deepens, we might want to keep an eye out for more charges like these creeping in. This chips away further at the public service ethos of our NHS, ensuring that less and less is available for free. It's a process that can creep on gradually in a way that people don't notice. After all, once you start charging for medicines and eye care, why not for x-rays and ambulances, as happens in some other countries?
Exactly, so
After
little
a while
by
like
little.
this, you get to a...
Isn't the real point of that, what they were saying is that it will happen so slowly and so gradually.
That we won't notice.
Yes.
And
that is
like,
a real life conspiracy.
Yeah.
Of people conspiring to do something behind your back without you even noticing.
Yeah. Has anyone you've known needed to go to hospital or had to use an ambulance, and what do you think about having to pay for this?
Yeah, I've known both. I've known people that have had to be in hospital and had to use an ambulance. Having to pay for ambulance service is ridiculous.
But I mean, would it potentially make people want to do these sort of things less? I mean, require that? I mean, it's not like you're ever gonna go out actively seeking the. But I mean, if you did break your arm and you had to pay for an ambulance, you probably would. You wouldn't pay for the ambulance.
Imagine if you found a lump, but you were like, oh, it's fine, because I can't afford 20 quid for this checkup.
And what would you be paying for? Petrol?
Yeah.
The service.
The service?
The service.
Service
So,
charge. Oh, we gave you CPR, that'll be £100. Oh, we just gave you a central
Yeah,
line,
no,
that'll
that's
be
ridiculous.
50.
How crazy the thought of it is just actually insane.
After a while like this, you get to a point where only very basic care is available for free. Then you effectively have a two-tier system where people that can afford to pay get treated promptly in the private sector, while less well-off people or those with more complicated needs have to join a long waiting list to use the few remaining public health services. Step 4 is to withdraw free services entirely from groups that are politically unpopular. Immigrants are often the easiest people to pick on. We saw the first signs of this in the UK recently with the push to start charging foreign nationals for NHS care. Once you've withdrawn free care from one group, it's easy to go further. Perhaps you make it difficult for unemployed people to get proper healthcare on the basis that they're not paying for it through tax. For example, Canada's public health system provides full care for those in paid work, but more limited services for unemployed people. With this step, you're really starting to cement the idea that healthcare isn't a basic right that we provide collectively for our whole society. It's something that you buy for yourself by paying tax and social security. And if anybody is unable to pay their way, well, hard luck.
Would you be concerned with a healthcare service where rich people get preferential treatment over poorer people?
I would be very, very concerned if a healthcare system was put in place where the rich are put above the poor.
I think if that becomes a rule, that sounds a bit cleansy.
I think to some extent it has already been implemented. Like, if you are on the NHS, you can't afford private healthcare, you are going to be waiting years. Like, my own dad waited years for an operation, just, you know, on his like ankle. I mean, he didn't even have to stay overnight for it, believe it or not. He got sent home the same day, like, but he waited a good like 3 years nearly for that operation.
Whereas if he'd forked up a couple of grand, he could get it done in a week.
Exactly. And he might have been able to stay overnight. You never know.
Yeah. Oh, they might have given him a bed.
You never
How
know.
kind of them.
Inequality is rife in day-to-day life, you know, let alone when it comes down to health. You know, all people are created equal, you know, supposedly, and something like health, like, I get people earn more money and people wear swankier clothes and people go to nicer restaurants or whatever, but health, we should all be on the same page. And I mean, I'm not about having like some sort of communist state where we're, you know, there's always going to be a rich and poor, I get that, but when it comes to something like health, no one should have the Prada shoes and no one should be rocking sort of Bobby Market rip-offs. We should all be on the same page on that.
We're talking about immigration and how it's just a distraction. It's a distraction from things like this, and that's what this video is saying, that you know, the groups that are politically unpopular, such as immigrants, are used as a way to distract people from the fact that they're being controlled and taken advantage of, right? There's nothing to do with immigrants. Whoever's made the decision that immigrants can't get free healthcare doesn't give a shit about whether immigration. All they care is that, you know, just distracting people from what's really going on.
This allows you to move smoothly to the final step in the covert privatisation process. Step 5. Remove free care altogether. By now, there's so little health service left that it's easy to let the last bits wither away. Funding gets cut every year until the very last free health services are forced to shut up shop. This would mark the end of our National Health Service, our nation's greatest invention that has kept us healthy since 1948. It would return our country to the health system we had before World War II, where most people couldn't afford the doctor, so when they got ill, they stayed ill. We're often told that the only alternative to austerity cuts and privatisation is to increase the deficit and get the nation even deeper into debt every year. But there is another way to pay for better public services. It's called tax. We believe that a decent health service is worth paying for, and we can afford it if we increase taxes for wealthy people and for corporations.
Do you think big banks and corporations should be taxed more to keep the NHS working?
I do, with all my heart, believe the big corporations and banks should be taxed out of their fucking assholes.
If you're going on the basis of like, if you have, then you give, then yeah, I think that should be the case.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, if you care about your fellow human, then, and you can afford it because you're a big company, a big bank, then yeah, that seems straightforward to me.
Yeah.
You don't even have to pay like 90% tax from companies and corporations. Just pay the tax that you owe at the current rate.
It's true.
Let's start from there, first step.
Yeah.
You know, and then we can
Stop
see
trying
what
to
goes
dodge
from
it.
there, and then you can increase tax. But first of all, just pay what you owe,
really
like
bad.
every other person in society.
Yeah.
Take like 1% of like Amazon's like UK sales.
If you took 1% of Amazon's UK sales, what does that do for Amazon?
Reduces their profit by nothing, absolutely nothing.
Doesn't really change anything.
Maybe it means they can't get that extra slide in the office.
A leading medical charity judged that the UK's cancer services have been so weakened by slashed budgets that hospitals can't cope with the growing number of patients coming to them with the disease.
The government promised no top-down reorganisation of the NHS, but now £3 billion, which would otherwise have been devoted to patient care, has been squandered on just such a reorganisation. The Royal College of Nursing is predicting a loss of over 56,000 jobs.
No, when someone says privatise, do you know what privatise means? It means we're going to do the same job for less money because we're obliged to make a profit. The first thing they do is they cut staff costs. Shouldn't the priority not be we need to make money, but we need to help people get better? If you shift that ideology, then you're going to change everything.
The NHS is currently going through its tightest financial squeeze since 1955. While the health service is not facing budget cuts in the same way as other parts of the public sector, its funding is not increasing to meet the growth in demand.
Fair enough if you don't cut, but you're not putting the money into it. To me, and it's completely true. Like, everyone's always like, especially Labour have come out and said that health will be one of the 3 like protected services that aren't going to face cuts. But how much are you putting into it to meet the demand? Like, fair enough, alright, if you stop the cuts, but you've got to keep the money going in.
There are 64 Tories and 7 Liberal Democrat MPs who have recent or current financial links to companies or individuals trying to profit from the sell-off of the NHS. So hold on a minute, I'm not great at maths, but that's 71 members of the government benefit from the selling off of the NHS on a personal level. Now, do you think, what do you think is more important to them? Their personal benefits or their jobs as MP?
The personal benefits. Obviously.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's it.
Corporations and the government are one and the same. It's the same thing.
Yesterday I met with the care workers unions. Some of the workers that I met were working in care homes with people with complex needs like autism or severe mental health issues. They told me that since their local authority had been privatised, their wages had been cut by 9%, and they said that the morale is really low and lots of agency workers on minimum wage are brought in to do work. So there's like, they have to take care of the agency workers, they have to take care of their what are called service users, that's the mentally ill people and that. They said there's too much stress on them and it creates a bad atmosphere, so the people there get a worse service and they themselves feel bad.
Around 7 hours into the shift, I was on my break, and 5 minutes into the break, I had to be called. I wish we are better staffed, somebody who's senior to take the call.
Seems like they almost want it to be this way, so that they can justify privatising it and saying, well, the people that can afford it, and it went this way because no one had any money to put into it. Seems like they almost want it, but that's why those 71 people are completely making the wrong decision by letting that decision sway them, because that's not true at all. They're come to letting it die before their eyes just so they can make this game.
This is A&E working at its most effective, but it's intensely hard work, involving mental and physical strain in an environment where there's no room for error. It's a workload few can stand for long.
There's another patient just come in, but I've got no space at the moment.
Quite often this happens in emergency department where you get 1 or 2 or 3 calls unexpectedly and you are tied up with spaces, especially at this time of the year.
Stress, frustrations and long hours can lead to emotional and physical exhaustion. The demands of one of the toughest jobs in medicine sometimes take their toll.
Sad, mentally exhausted. It's the second bad news I'm bringing to 2 families today. It affects you. I mean, yes, I know you look at it as your job. Sometimes you love it, doing it to help out people. But at the end of the day, you are a human being. It affects you at some point. It gets you. You can't control it. You do have a defense to a degree, but I feel sad.
It's terrifying. It's horrible, and it's really upsetting that these people are putting so much of themselves into their jobs and not being not even just financially kept afloat, or like having enough money put into them, or like time.
They've kind of created a situation where they've pushed it to the brink.
Yeah.
They've made all these cuts. So exactly like you said. So it's like, look, it's got this shit. It's got this bad. Let's just privatise it and it can go back to being good again. So again, they're completely using the sort of demise of it to back the privatisation.
It's a very political thing to do, isn't it? To make them save face, isn't it? Like that.